doubt you've seen the chaos in the streets. We must make an example, or France will fall. What would you do if this assignment of defense was transferred to you?
I promise you brilliant successes.
Everyone around here.
What is this costume you have on?
This is my uniform.
Everyone so near.
I led the French victory at Toulon.
Hi, welcome to northern Italy. This is the site of Napoleon's first successful battle as a commander-in-chief. And it's in the mountains where the Alps and the Apennines meet, near the Mediterranean in Piedmont in northern Italy. And I've just driven from Genoa to this mountain spot, which is where the Austrian and Piedmont army met with Napoleon's revolutionary army, where he started his campaign to liberate northern Italy for France, a revolutionary France, and to establish his name as a great general. I don't think I can do better to sort of summarize the campaign across northern Italy, but to read one of the sort of summaries on the back cover of a great book called The Road to Rivoli. In 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte was given command of one of the armies defending revolutionary France. And it certainly wasn't the most prestigious army. It was struggling, it was poorly equipped. None of the generals that he was taking command of really believed that this young 26-year-old, who was an astonishing choice. His total experience of campaigning was a few weeks as an advisor or commanding artillery 2 years ago in these mountains. He'd never been in a major battle. The army he was given was starving, short of weapons, dressed in rags and on the point of mutiny. What chance did he have? As it turned out, rather a good one. The Piedmontese resisted the French for over 3 years, but after 2 weeks against Napoleon proved too much, and they asked for peace. Their Austrian allies were then chased and harried halfway across Italy to the great fortress of Mantua. A long siege followed, punctuated by hard-fought battles as the Austrians desperately fought to relieve the town, while Napoleon, often on the knife edge between success and disaster, thwarted them every time. So that's the story that I'll try and tell in this series of videos of northern Italy. So I thought it would be helpful to give you an insight into the strategic picture of what was going on in Napoleon's first campaign in northern Italy. So what you can see here is northern Italy with Piedmont on the left here and Lombardy on the right. And essentially this is the campaign area that Napoleon fought. So Napoleon's troops were around the Mediterranean here, moving into France, and the Austrian forces basically held sway over northern Italy. They had a couple of allies that were more like puppet states. One was Piedmont, which was owned by the Piedmont Sardinian kingdom, and they were the allies of Austria against France. They've been fighting for 2 years in this area with no real movement either way, exchanging sort of somewhat half-hearted battle victories, but actually going nowhere. And you can see the mountains. This is the Apennines, and these are the Alps north of us. And so basically there is this battlefield of Montanet, which is the first battle that Napoleon fought. He was bringing his troops, trying to get through these mountains into the flat, rich, arable plain of Piedmont, and then into Lombardy, and then threaten Vienna itself up in the top right. Napoleon's strategy is to split the Piedmontese Sardinian army from the Austrian army under Bülow here. And so what he does is he waits for an opportunity to actually split them. And they met around this sort of line between Alexandria and down to sort of Savona. And so as soon as he gets the opportunity, he attacks and splits the two armies, sending the Austrian army back to the east and the Piedmont army back to Turin, which is up here, which is their capital city. And so fundamentally, he is dividing and conquering, using an overwhelming force, bringing overwhelming force against one particular point, even though he was actually outnumbered by both armies together. So we first come to the Battle of Montanet. Probably not pronouncing that well, but my Italian is not, leaves an awful lot to be desired. So essentially we're high up in the mountains between the Alps north of us and the Apennines, which basically are coastal mountains all the way around to Genoa, and you can see how mountainous it is. And if we follow the windmills, if we follow the ridge, this is the ridge in which the battle was fought. So essentially it started off as a couple of Austrian battalions who were trying to climb the ridge to get rid of a small contingent of French on the top of that ridge there, Mount Negrino, and the French kept bringing troops up to reinforce the ridge, and in the end 3 divisions of French troops moved to the west of this ridge and cut off the retreat, threatened to cut the supply line of the Austrian troops under Bülow. And Napoleon basically used his time-long strategy of keep outflanking and threaten the supply lines so that your enemy has to give up and retreat, and then you hit them very hard on the retreat. So that's what happened. The Austrians had to never did take the redoubt on the ridge, and retreated all the way north of us, and were hit very hard on the retreat, lost a couple of thousand men. But this was the first successful battle that Napoleon fought. And as we'll see, it was a long line of small battles or actions in the mountains in order to actually get through the mountains onto the flat plains of Piedmont. On the 12th of April 1796, Napoleon had his first victory at Montalet. Well, a day after, a couple of days after, he received his first setback at this place, Cosseria. So, having pushed the Austrians back east, Napoleon felt it was safe to come down this valley, all the way down this valley following the river, and to advance on Malissimo, and then to Montesimola, and then on to Keva. So basically there was an Austrian presence under a guy, General Provero, and he basically had a couple of thousand troops and got cut off from reinforcements from the west, from the Piedmontese. So he hightailed it for the hills and found this disused castle. So from the 16th century, this disused castle, and they hold up here, and it was such a difficult stronghold that it held up Napoleon's army for 2 days, and that delay basically was very frustrating because it messed up all the timing that Napoleon had for his various divisions. Augereau's division basically had multiple attacks, but you can see it's such a strong position and so high over the valley that they couldn't shift them, and it was only in the following day did the Piedmontese and Austrians surrender because they'd run out of ammunition, water and food. So that was Napoleon's first setback on his way to Bellissimo. On April the 14th, the day that Cossaria Castle fell, Napoleon rejoined Messina, who he'd sent north to complete the split between the Austrian and the Piedmontese troops. And he told him to take this town of Dago, which lies down before me. I'm standing on the stronghold of Dago, right up on the hills. The Austrians had made 5 strongholds. They got 18 guns, 4 and then 7 battalions of troops. So it was well defended, and the French, with Napoleon and Messina's division, came up from the south in the distance. And you can see, so they would have come up this road down to the bridge where the river runs through the town and out the other side. And so basically 5 different columns of French troops came over the ridges, over the hills on either side, as well as a frontal attack, and enveloped the town. And eventually they overwhelmed the battalions, they captured the guns, and all was well. Or so they thought. Napoleon, thinking that the danger from enemy troops was over, moved a lot of the troops as reinforcements to the west, to Bellissimo, and a German, an Austrian general who got sent here by his Austrian boss, basically turned round and arrived the next morning to find all these drunken French soldiers who have looted and destroyed their way through the village. And as a result, he retook the village and took over the guns again. So the French had to bring more reinforcements, and eventually the town of Dago was French and in French hands, and the split between the Austrian forces to the east and the Piedmontese forces to the west were complete, allowing Napoleon to turn on his Piedmontese enemies. On hearing that Napoleon was told that the Austrians had retreated out of range and back up their supply lines towards the east, that left the Piedmontese army vulnerable for the French to come after them. So they moved west, and the Piedmontese army had set themselves up in a series of 4 major fortresses going east to west, and also a series of mountain ranges, of which I'm standing on one, that basically were entrenched and fortified. He came across the first one at Siva, which was anchored on the fortress of Siva, and eventually overnight, basically, the Piedmontese felt like they were too much at risk and moved back. They came to the second one 15 kilometers to the west, about 12 miles to the west, and I'm now standing, you can see the chapel, a little chapel in the background, along a line of a ridge of hills with really steep sides that go down. I don't think you can see any, but go down all the way down to the nearest town, and then you can sort of see that these hills continue along for a good 5, 6, 10 miles. So basically the Piedmontese had set themselves up here. They repulsed a French attack, knocking the French back from Saint Michel, which is the town just below us, and there's a river down there. They were trying to get across the river, they couldn't, and then eventually the French found an unguarded river crossing down to the far end, the southern end, which we're facing now, and they got across. And then the French did that thing that they did before with Sourier's division, and they all got drunk, and they kind of like thought that they'd kind of like won the day. Overnight they got completely drunk and basically stole everything, etc. in Saint Michel, and the Swiss came and beat their butts and knocked them across the river again. However, Colli, the Piedmontese general, felt he was too exposed and pulled all the Piedmontese troops back from this ridge all the way to a retreat to a place called Vicquefort, where they temporarily were going to stop and then move on to Mondarvie, that had magazines full of food and ammunition and fresh reinforcements. Here I am standing in front of the sanctuary of the Nativity of Mary, a massive church with supposedly some amazing frescoes dating from the sort of the 1800s. But a phenomenal kind of like building, but has nothing to do with my story, and I'm standing in the rain, so I'll make it short. So I'm in Vicquefort, and this is the end of the journey for the Piedmontese army. So General Colli ordered the Piedmontese out of the two ridges that were being defended, if you remember, and they pulled out at night, leaving the campfires burning to make the French think that they were still there, and retreated. But the French realized and caught them at 10 a.m. in this town, in a place called Vicquefort, which is, they were on their way to Mondarvie, which is a bigger town just down the road. And so basically there was pandemonium. The Piedmontese kind of like completely lost it. They weren't really organized for defense. They were just sort of moving through the town, and the French caught them, and it was ridiculous because the Piedmontese just scattered, going to Mondarvie and back towards Turin, and the Piedmontese had to first of all sue for some sort of treaty for a temporary peace, and then later for another 5 days' time for a peace treaty. And in 15 days, Napoleon had beaten the Piedmontese army and brought the whole of western northern Italy under his control. General Bonaparte had done that when the French actually had been at war with the Piedmontese since 1792, so essentially 4 years. And in 15 days, General Bonaparte had brought the surrender of the Piedmontese and was now able to focus on going east and facing the Austrian army that was regrouping towards the River Po. So as we come to the end of the first phase of Napoleon's campaign in northern Italy, I thought it'd be good that we got a quick recap. So as we saw, the French troops left Savona on the coast here and intercepted the Austrian troops at Montanet, and then further north up at Dago and separated the two armies. The Austrian army moved back towards Alexandria, pursued by one French division, and the other three divisions moved on Piedmont and a series of fortifications at Siva, at Millesimo, then Siva, then Saint Michel, these ridges here, and eventually were caught and dispersed and beaten by the French army at Vicoforte, which is just shy of Mondovi. At that point, the Piedmontese, whose capital city in Turin, they basically sued for peace. And so Montanet, the first battle was April the 12th, 1796. And amazingly, in 15 days, on the 27th of April, the King of Piedmont agrees to all Napoleon's terms. So that leaves Napoleon then focusing on the Austrians, and the Austrians retreat back and do so behind the Po. So basically they're protecting Milan, and they're around Pavia, all the way around this area, thinking that that's where Napoleon is going to strike. So Napoleon typically brings all his troops eastwards through the Duke of Parma's territory to Piacenza, and through Piacenza he crosses the Po, and that's the story that is next to be told. I'm now on the banks of the River Po, which is on the border of Lombardy, and is the main barrier from Piedmont into Lombardy. And I've driven 2 hours up from Genoa today to Piacenza, which was where Napoleon's troops basically crossed this river, probably looking similar as it does at the moment in flood, which it was then on the sort of 6th, 7th, 8th of May. So about the same time of year. So if you remember, Piedmont had surrendered. Napoleon could turn his full attention to the Austrians in the east, and what he was trying to do was to actually break into Lombardy and then to push towards the fortress of Mantua. So the Austrian generals that were typically over 70 and a bit sluggish and slow had not anticipated this incredible speed that Bonaparte pushed his divisions to down the south of the Po River and into the Duke of Parma's kingdom, who he technically was at war at, and outflanked yet again General Bülow of the Austrian forces. So they were running to catch up. So he kept moving to the east, and then found this as a decent place where he could essentially cross the river. So he crossed a little bit west of here. You can see the opposite bank. Initially they couldn't find a bridge, so they basically used ferries and boats and got an advance guard across, and started to fortify, and then got another division across, and eventually all 4 divisions were on the northern side of the banks of the Po and into Lombardy, and we will see where they went next. I'm standing by the old bridge of Pizza Gattoni, which I believe was exactly where the bridge existed in Napoleon's time, because there's a tower that goes back to I think it's the 1600s. So this must have been the site of the original bridge. So basically, Napoleon manages to get 3 of his 4 divisions across the Po, as we just saw, the River Po, and this is the next obstacle in his way. The whole Napoleonic warfare was done from water obstacle to water obstacle, and the bridges that were a lot less numerous than they are now were really important, because you couldn't get cavalry, you couldn't get artillery, you couldn't get the wagons and supplies across without the bridges. So essentially, Napoleon strikes north as fast as he can in terms of, and there's a race to the Adda River, which is where we are now. Unfortunately, a small detachment of Austrians get here first, and I'm standing on the Austrian side. The French would have come up on the other side, and I managed to get cannons and a little bit of entrenchment and fortification here. And basically Napoleon decided that this was going to be too difficult a job to get across here. He did leave by his speed and flanking maneuver east and then north. He left Bülow and most of the Austrian army still to the west, and they're desperately racing to catch up. It was a race to see if they could get to the other side of the Adda River. Otherwise, Napoleon was going to catch the entire Austrian army on the wrong side. And so what then happened was General Bülow makes for Lodi, which is the next big bridge up the River Adda, and gets across at Lodi, and Napoleon catches the Austrian rearguard at Lodi. I feel like one of those weather reporters reporting on being in the hurricane. Certainly it is wet, and as you can see, the Adda is in full flow. So we're now in Lodi. This is not the ancient bridge, but a newer bridge about 50 meters further upstream, and basically Lodi was the place that the Austrian troops were all racing for to get to the safety of the eastern side, and Napoleon was trying to head them off, and Napoleon caught the rear guard of the Austrians here in Lodi, and basically this bridge became the focus of attention because all the Austrians were on the other side of the bridge, the far side, and the French came down this road down here and down the main road here, and they basically put a whole load of artillery all the way down this road, firing on the bridge. The Austrians had artillery and two ranks of infantry and cavalry the other side, and basically Napoleon incited his guys. They were shooting artillery onto the bridge so that they couldn't blow the bridge up. It was a massive oversight that it hadn't been blown already. The Austrians never realized that Napoleon would move so quickly, and so Napoleon sent his cavalry further up to see if he could find a ford and come round the other side to cut them off. They didn't arrive, so at 6 p.m. that evening he kind of went for the Hail Mary, and he basically said, look, I want volunteers to rush this bridge. So a whole load of carabiniers went onto the bridge, and they got a little way, and then the artillery kind of like with canister was flaying them alive, and at least 4 generals stepped up and led the charge across the bridge in some amazing sort of feat of bravery. And so eventually that went through. They took the bridge. They thought they were against the whole of the army of Bülow, but in actual fact it was just the rear guard that they basically were fighting, and the Austrians retired to Fontana, which is a village further east. But the important part was that Napoleon now really had Lombardy by the throat, and he had access to Milan, and it effectively brought this phase of the campaign to a finished, successful conclusion. The only thing was that he didn't manage to cut off the whole of the Austrian army, and it went back to Mantua to regroup. So I'm beginning to think that this is like the bridges of Madison County, only in northern Italy. Anyway, so we left you at Lodi, and at Lodi basically the Austrian army escaped across the bridge, and Napoleon then pursued them all the way east until we got to this river, the river Mincio, which flows north to south from Lake Garda all the way to past the really impressive fortress of Mantua that the Austrians used as their sort of locus of power in Lombardy. And so on the right hand side of this picture over here you see Borghetto, which is the town that the bridge is named after, and Borghetto was supposedly being protected all the way down this river. The Austrians had put their troops, 31,000, well, about 29,000 troops, but they put them all the way down the river at all the 4 different bridging points, plus up at the Lake Garda. And so there was never very many troops protecting any one given place. So this seems to be a little bit of a foolish move, but essentially what happened was Napoleon sent his troops focused on this one out of the 4 bridges. He didn't have bridging equipment, so he had to use a bridge. And they caught the Austrians by surprise. The Austrians still had a company of infantry over the other side. They ran back, chucking away the planks, the bridging planks as they came, and it didn't take very long for the infantry that Napoleon had sent over to actually get across the bridge and to take the 1 artillery piece and 1 battalion that the Austrians still had protecting this. And so with that, Napoleon was really able to roll up the rest of the forces that were set along the Mincio. So here's a map of the Mincio River, and you can see essentially on the right hand side in red, these are all the Austrian forces that Bülow had actually put all the way down the river. So here we are, yet again, another bridge that Napoleon has successfully managed to get past, and with that came the end of this phase, because essentially the Austrians had to retreat. They retreated down their supply line all the way to the Tyrol, up into the Alps, on the way to Innsbruck, where the Austrians basically were being supplied from. So that brings the May conflict really to an end, and we shall see what happens next. Just show you the rest of it while there's no traffic. The river Mincio. So when Napoleon and his troops managed to force their way across the Mincio River. Most of the Austrian troops moved north to retreat to the Alps, but some of the infantry that were on the south end of the river basically went to the fortress city of Mantua. And I'm at the fortress city now, and it's still amazing. This is the castle of St. George. Yeah, they're big into St. George too. And it is surrounded on three sides by this massive lake of the Mincio River. You can see that side, this side. There's only two bridges that went across, and they were heavily fortified with castles at both ends of the bridges. And this was a serious fortress. It was considered to be one of the strongest fortresses in the whole of Europe. The main wall, the outside wall, is all gone now. It would have been where the road is, all the way round. And it was capable of having 30,000 troops. So that would have been a third of the Austrian army. But the problem wasn't keeping enough room for the troops and the townsfolk. It was feeding everybody. And there were two big problems. So they filled this place up with about 12,000 troops, but all the marshland outside and around this fortress city basically gave everybody malaria, French and Austrian alike. The French came down and surrounded it and set siege to it, and thousands actually died, probably more than actually fought around this area. And then basically towards in a month or so, then there was famine and people running out of food because the French had locked it all tight and had it completely besieged. So we leave Mantua in Napoleon's capable hands, and we'll see what happens. This is the back, or may even be the front, of the palace of St. George in the middle of Mantua, the fortress city that was so difficult to actually take. Just amazing buildings. Just thought I'd give you a quick glimpse of the architecture. Getting dizzy. So the first half of the Italian campaign really came to an end at the bridge and the Battle of Borghita, as we saw. And you can see Borghita, it's at the bottom here with the Mincio River going down from Lake Garda. And so what happened was that Napoleon then went down to Mantua at the bottom right, and he besieged the fortress city with 12,000 Austrian soldiers and 25,000 townsfolk in it. And that was the end of May. Now, by the beginning of August, the Austrians had put together a new army and appointed a new general, fired Bulow, a General Wurmser. And General Wurmser had got lots of reinforcements, had an army of 50,000 men, so numerically superior to the French, and came up with a plan to come down either from the north, from the Alps, either side of Lake Garda. And on the left-hand side, the western side, Quasdanovich came down with 18,000 men, and 32,000 men came down the other side, where you see Dolce and coming down toward Castelnuove. So essentially, Napoleon was stuck with a very tricky decision. So he decided to try and fight the smaller army on the other side of Lake Garda, and moved in that direction. And in order to actually have enough troops, he had to lift the siege of Mantua. They had siege guns down there, and they were besieging and trying to knock the walls down, and had been doing so for a month or two. But he had to leave all the equipment and move all of those troops that were besieging Mantua up north and north west towards Castiglione, which is to the bottom of left of Lake Garda. So on August the 3rd, 1796, Augereau's division met, as you can see on the top left, at Castiglione, around the town, Lipthay's division of Austrians. The Austrians are red, the French are blue. The 2 days later, that was almost a stalemate. The Austrians had to move back some. But 2 days later, a lot more troops got involved in the Battle of Castiglione. And I'm standing at the moment on the tower that is on Solferino. And you can just see a red cavalry unit just by Solferino, top right of the Austrian line. And so what happened was Bonaparte deliberately asked his troops to pull back a little bit to use up some time. The Austrians thought that they were winning and moved forward, and then bottom right, Sourier, which were all the troops that he'd released from Mantua, the fortress that was being besieged, came and hit the Austrians in the rear, and Wurmser was now in trouble. So he decided he would have to try and retreat, and at that point Napoleon did a full attack, frontal attack through Wurmser's infantry, and Sourier attacked from the back, and Leclerc, who was around Solferino, took Solferino Tower. Okay, so we're standing on the tower now, and here you can see the battlefield. So Castiglione is over there in the distance, and then this is the battlefield in which it was fought. So these are the heights of Solferino, and I'm taking this picture from the tower of Solferino, which is about 1,000 years old. And here you can see the plain of Solferino, or Castiglione, and this is where the battle was fought. Eventually the Austrians, realizing that they were in deep trouble, had to retreat any way they could, and they managed to get again back behind the Mincio Valley to the east, and that was the end of the first attempt of the Austrians to relieve the siege of Mantua, and the Napoleon's troops went back to where they basically were and started to besiege Mantua, the fortress again, but this time they didn't have any siege equipment and guns. So at that point it was just a question of it being a blockade. Here we are in the valley between Trento and Bassano, and so basically this is the second attempt by Wurmser to get to a point where he could relieve Mantua. So instead of coming straight down the side of Lake Garda as he tried before, this time what he's doing is he's going around to the east using another valley just as steep, amazingly steep, and he's trying to spring a trap to catch Napoleon unawares. Unfortunately, Napoleon had plans of his own and basically decided to attack at the same time that Wurmser left Trento, and he attacks up the road through Rivoli up to Trento through along the Adige River, along the side of Lake Garda. And when he finds out that Wurmser has left with a massive army, he is quite naturally aggressive, and decides that what he's going to do is he's going to catch the Austrians. So there's this race through the valleys Austrians were planning to take 6 days to march through this valley, of which I'm doing in about an hour and a half. Anyway, so back to the story. So basically, Napoleon sets his troops the task of catching their advance guard, catching the Austrian rear guard, which he does at Primolona. And basically at Primolona they overcome the rear guard after a bit of a fight in a very narrow gorge, and they get to a point where the valley opens out into the plains at Bassano, and that becomes the Battle of Bassano, where essentially the French troops take on the 4 or 5 battalions that have been left as a covering force at the end of the gorge before it goes into Bassano proper, and they beat those battalions. They shoot through as fast as they can into the city. There's complete confusion. The rear guard from that was supposed to be protecting the city stream back in a rout, which actually creates this incredible panic. And usually the Austrians don't actually panic, but this time it is a pure rout, and they run through the city. The cannons on the bridge are left unattended, and Messina takes the bridge on the western side of the city. There's a massive traffic jam as all the carriages and wagons and artillery are basically stopped up in the city, and cause massive sort of blockage as everyone's trying to get out. So basically, one of the divisions moves back towards Venice, and Wurmser takes what he can put together as the rest of his troops and races southwest to see if he can get to Mantua before the French can stop him and bring him to a final battle. So this is what the French would have seen as they entered Bassano. Well, not quite, but you get my drift. I'm sure that there was less cars around then. And maybe a few statues, but you can see the type of walls, the old city walls that would have been around the old city here. This is one of the main squares of Bassano, so you can kind of imagine the French troops running through the streets, chasing these poor Austrians that hadn't got a clue what's going on really, and chasing them basically out of the town, across the bridges, and on their way, and them all scattering and going in sort of 3 different directions, and Wurmser, the Austrian general, desperately trying to bring his troops together and make one last sort of ditch stand by trying to get to Mantua, either to seek refuge or maybe you know, just pull off a miracle. And that's where we leave him. So what happened to General Wurmser? Well, as I said, one of his Austrian divisions basically made its way towards Venice and kind of like got out of the theatre of operations altogether. And then another, and then you can see in the rear view mirror all the mountains we're leaving behind. So Wurmser went the same way that I'm going, back to my hotel in Verona. He went to Vicenza, and basically, oh, I hate that one. I say that so often. He went to Vicenza and then cut down through country, across country, and Messina, the French general, was desperately trying to catch him up and to see if he couldn't cut him off before he gets to Mantua, but with no avail. So Messina takes the wrong choice of 2 routes and goes the long way, and Wurmser, with his remaining kind of like stragglers, and I think it's about 10,000 or so men out of the 50,000 that he started with, basically arrive at Mantua, and instead of being hailed as the conquering hero that relieves Mantua, he despondently, they all kind of like ride in and join the rest of the inmates as the French basically seal the place off again with a blockade. So poor old Wurmser, he loses his job and he gets locked up at the same time. So more anon. So Mantua was very important to the Austrians, so important that they appointed a new general, General Alvinsky, and gave him 50,000 men, and they came up with a new plan that Davidovich was going to come down the eastern side of Lake Garda, and engage the French there, and the rest of the troops, without Alvinsky at the head, would come via the east, coming to Bassona, and then on to Verona, where they wanted to engage the French. So Napoleon was outnumbered and on the defensive, and he was trying desperately to keep the siege going. So he brought his troops, and they met just outside Verona at a place called Caldero. And Caldero was a battle, but it was an inconsequential one. The first one happened in the middle of a thunderstorm. Nobody knew what was going on. And then essentially the Austrians poured more and more men, and the French had to retreat beyond and into Verona. So Napoleon's looking around for a new plan. And that new plan was to take his idea of the crossing of the Po and sort of scale it down, and to sort of try and do a right flank maneuver and get up behind the Austrians and hit them hard from behind and below. So he needed to get across the River Adige, and that's where this place comes in. This is Ronco on the Adige, and this is the place where there was a pontoon bridge, a French pontoon bridge, and they very quickly tried to get the army across here so that it would get to the other side of the Adige where the Austrians were, and would come up from the south and surprise them in the rear. And that was Napoleon's plan. As we all know, the best defense is attack. This is the Battle of Arcola, but it's not an easy one to explain. The big picture, the Austrian plan, is that Alvinci, coming from the east, is going to take Verona and get across the Adige there. That Davidovich is coming down from the Alps and will meet up in Verona, and that Wurmser in Mantua will break free with his troops and they'll all meet up and beat Napoleon. Napoleon's plan, as we just saw, is to do a right hook, essentially, to get out of the pincer movement that he finds himself in. So the right hook gets him across the pontoon bridge at Romco, and Messina's division turns immediately left and goes up the dike alongside the river there, and the other Augereau's division comes up here, which is the bridge of Arcola, which is on a tributary, the Alpon of the Adige river. So, but the situation is that everything that you see here is marshland and nobody can actually travel on it. And the only thing that you can travel on are these very narrow dikes that pretty much are exactly as they were 200 years ago by the Alpon River. So you can imagine you're silhouetted up here, you are such a sitting duck, and the French troops came up here and they wanted to take the bridge at Arcola to get into the town, and then but it was much more strongly fortified than the Napoleon had thought, and on the first day they got about as far as here, and the withering fire just caused everybody to run and to basically hide down these really steep banks that you can see here. So first day was really a stalemate. Napoleon came up with a couple of very innovative ideas, including going all the way down, crossing a bridge down there, trying to come back on the other side of the bank and to try and take the town. Everybody just poured in more troops. The second day, the same thing was happening. Terrible casualties on these causeways. It was great for defense, but as soon as anybody started to attack, they got really beat up and with very high casualties. And then finally, so the battle flowed one way, the other way. Finally, on the third day, the French really kind of prevailed, and Albinsky pulled back to nearer Caldera, and he also got word from Davidovich that he hadn't actually made as much progress, and Wurmser hadn't moved from Mantua. So in the end, basically the whole plan fell apart, and the Austrians retreated back to the Alps and back eastwards to the Brenta River, where they kind of encamped. And the third attempt at trying to get out of get the Austrians out of the siege failed. So literally, this is the incredible valley that has been carved out by the Adige River that the Austrians sent some of their main columns down when they attacked at least 2 times to try and relieve Mantua. And it's just so narrow, and the sides are just massive. I don't know how high those are, but they're so steep. obviously glacial U-shaped valley with lots of vineyards along the way and poppies everywhere. Very pretty, and as you can see, just very alpine, because of course this actually goes straight into the Alps and eventually comes out near Innsbruck, which was a big Austrian centre, big city in Napoleon's time, and it was their main supply route. This is their main supply route in and out. So just beautiful, really beautiful, and amazing that the troops all poured down here. And it wasn't until they got to Rivoli, further south, did they have the opportunity of taking any of the artillery and the carts and the wagons and the supplies out of the very narrow valley. We now come to the last chapter of the Northern Italy campaign, and the fourth and final attempt of the Austrians in order to see if they could relieve Mantua. And just like before, there really were two options for coming down and trying to attack Mantua, one of which was come down the Adige Valley by Lake Garda that you can see in yellow, and they put Alvinci, who was the general again, put most of his troops coming down that northern to southern route, and then there was two diversionary columns coming around the Bassano and Brenta Valley, and there was a battle just outside Verona where one of the columns was pushed back, and the second column of Provero, the Austrian general, basically loitered to try and get across the Adige at Legnago, and took a long time doing so. So what that led to was Napoleon concentrating his troops to meet the main Austrian force coming down from the north, from Trento, down the Adige Valley, and that's where we are now. So this is the valley, and this is the valley where at Rivoli, where the valley suddenly opens up to the west, and was the first time that you could get artillery and cavalry coming out of the Adige Valley from the north and up the slopes of the sort of ramp up onto this plain. And this plain here was the battle site of the Battle of Rivoli. So the Austrians had advanced down the Adige Valley, which is just the other side of that very, very steep ridge that you see there, and they'd come down in 5 columns. 2 of the columns went down the valley itself, and 2 of them came over the mountains, and this was January, so there was snow and everything else, so there was significant delays. But they all came down the Lake Garda, the western side of the Adige River Valley, and they ended up here facing a French army over on that ridge. So that ridge is called the Trambasore Heights, and that's where the French, basically Joubert, General Joubert, had set up. He'd already come down from the north and retreated once, and he was just about to retreat again when Napoleon, convinced that this was the main Austrian attack, told him to wait here and he was bringing up Massena's division and more reinforcements overnight. So at 2 a.m. in the morning, Joubert and Napoleon went right up there, which is there's a chapel of St. Marco, and looked at the Austrian campfires that were all along this side of the Tasso tributary that goes into the Adige. And essentially the scene was set for a massive battle. So Napoleon arrives at something like 2 in the morning and connects to Joubert, and they decide that they are going to attack from these heights. They're wooded heights about 300 meters high. It's a whole ridge that goes across, and they attacked the Austrians who were down in the valley where the Trossa River tributary is, and up the sides of Mount Baldo that you can see there. So Joubert only had 8,000 men. They were up against 12,000, and the Austrians slowly started to get the upper hand, and the left wing of Joubert over here, and the right wing on the other side near the Adige Valley basically started to cave in. So about 10 o'clock, Napoleon got reinforcements with Massena's division arriving. They'd been marching all night, and he stops up the left wing with 2,000 men and stabilizes that, and then basically stabilizes the right side near Osteria, where the ramp goes up from the Adige Valley, which you can see in the distance. Out where Kozdanovich troops are in the valley, and what you can see now is the potential ramp, the ramp that goes up from the valley, that they could get their artillery and wagons, and they had a whole division of men, 2 divisions actually, one the other side of the river that was successfully at this time managing to beat the French and cross the river, and there was this massive sort of column of men, Austrian soldiers, that were waiting to pour out onto the battlefield on the Austrian left flank. And the French had managed to sort of up till this point kind of like keep them in, because they'd had the control of both sides of this this sort of ramp up to the heights up here. But what's happened now is that because of the pressure that they've been on and having to retreat from some of the ridge that we were just talking about, they've lost the opportunity to keep the pressure on, and the Austrians are starting to stream out onto the plain. And so at this point you've got the Austrians who are putting enormous pressure on the French on the ridge. You've got a division of the Austrians that actually has gone round the right flank and is threatening the supply line further south. And you've got now 2 potential divisions starting to come up on the left flank, up here on this, what I call the ramp, onto the plain from the Adige Valley. And so it's looking pretty dire for the French at this point. Napoleon keeps his head and says, no, they're ours, it's going to be okay. And he whistles up as many cavalry as he potentially has, and right where the column of Austrians are pouring out onto the plain, which is just about here, he does a cavalry charge and he sends in infantry after the cavalry, and what happens is that the column breaks, the column retreats in disorder. Because of that, the infantry just on the other side of the ridge near here start to rout, and suddenly the tide of the battle turns towards the French side, and what we start to see is the French regrouping. Because the pressure had been taken off the French right hand side, they were able to redistribute troops onto the ridge and push the Austrians off the ridge and back down to their original starting positions the other side of the Tasso River. So that really is the end of the story of the battle, and as a result, what Joubert is able to do is consolidate that situation for the night, and the French are in control of the battlefield as the Austrians have to retire. So here we have a map of the battle, and you can see the French along the ridge that they got pushed back on, and you can also see down here the Austrians coming up the ramp from the Adige Valley. So what happened in the end was that the Austrians retreated. It was a rout, certainly for part of the army, and the next day Alvinsky tried again to see if he could attack from further north, but Joubert cut him off, and he had to retire towards back towards Innsbruck and north towards the Tyrol. So of the 28,000 Austrians that came down on this side to the Battle of Rivoli, 10,000 had to surrender, which included a whole division down here that basically had encircled the French, but then got encircled by itself and had to surrender, which was about 5,000 men. You know, 14,000 of the 28,000 basically either surrendered or were casualties. And here you can see the battlefield yet again. There's the ridge. There you can see the Austrian positions in the far end. So just as Napoleon was finishing the battle, or knowing that the battle was won, he got news that Provorot, right down on the eastern plains, was threatening to walk into Mantua and to liberate it with about 7,000 troops. So he dashed. He didn't even finish the battle. He dashed and rode all night to get down to Mantua, and got Massini's division to actually to follow him with a false march. And they met at La Favorita, which is a palace just outside of Mantua. And Mantua Wurmser came out finally and did tried to fight his way out of the siege, and was beaten. Essentially, him and Provorot were beaten by Massena and Napoleon. And with that, really Mantua's fate was sealed. So it was it was another month or so before they finally ran out of any type of food. They'd long shot all the cavalry horses because they were starving, and Mantua basically gave in. The French took control of the whole of northern Italy, and with that the road was now open for Napoleon to move east across north of Venice and then up into Austria and to threaten Vienna itself. And one nice little byproduct was that the Pope was now under so much pressure that he had to actually sign a treaty and agree to be friends with the French, which I'm sure meant that he gnashed his teeth much. I don't know about you, but I felt a need for a postscript or an epilogue. This is a fabulous backdrop. This is the Castle Veglia over the river in Verona. Just a beautiful medieval bridge and castle. So at 27, Napoleon had achieved an enormous amount. The surrender of Mantua yielded 15,000 prisoners plus 6,000 in the hospital, and 28,000 people had been absorbed once Wurmser had retired there, and so there was something like 7,000 dead or missing. Napoleon then basically sent a force of 5,000 troops down to threaten Rome, and the Pope basically agreed to pay another 15 million lira on top of the money that he'd already paid, and a couple more works of art. So what happened then? So after that, there was about 6 more engagements as in the new year, in the winter and spring of 1797, the French armies, which have regrouped and some reinforcements, moved across the Lombardy plains, north of Venice, north of Trieste. There were 6 different small battles against Archduke Charles, who was Austria's best general, and Napoleon, his armies crossed the Alps and moved into Austria proper, coming within striking distance of Vienna. And with that, basically the Austrian Imperial Command offered a truce and then a peace treaty that was signed on April the 17th, 1797. So a year, almost to the day, after hostilities had started at Montenot way back in 1796, he had basically brought the Austrian Empire to their knees and given France the whole of North Italy, and also subjected the northern Italian and middle Italian kingdoms to the French rule as well. Not bad for a 27-year-old.
No doubt you've seen the chaos in the streets. We must make an example, or France will fall. What would you do if this assignment of defense was transferred to you?
I promise you brilliant successes.
Everyone around here.
What is this costume you have on?
This is my uniform.
Everyone so near.
I led the French victory at Toulon.